I never thought I'd be one of those men. You know the ones. The fools. The blind, clueless idiots who spend their whole lives thinking they have a loyal wife, a strong marriage, a family built on love and trust, only to wake up one day and realize it was all a damn lie. For 40 years, I believed in my wife, Sharon. I trusted her with everything I had. And why wouldn't I? She was my partner, my best friend, the mother of my children. We built a life together, raised a family, survived the ups and downs of marriage. And yet, somewhere along the way, she became a stranger. I just didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to. It started with little things. Subtle, quiet shifts that don't seem like much at first. A change in the way she spoke to me. The way she pulled away when I reached for her hand. The way she started locking her phone. Then came the health problems. At first, it was stomach pains. Headaches. Fatigue. I told her to see a doctor, but she kept brushing it off, until one day, she announced that she needed to stay in the hospital for observation. "I'll only be gone a few days," she said, folding clothes into a small suitcase. I remember standing in the doorway, watching her. Something felt off. But I pushed the thought away. Of course, I worried about her. I visited every night after work, brought her flowers, books, her favorite chocolates. I sat by her hospital bed, held her hand, asked how she was feeling. And every night, I saw it. The distance. The coldness in her eyes. The way she barely looked at me anymore. Then there was her phone. She was always on it. And whenever I walked into the room, she'd quickly lock the screen and set it aside like it was nothing. I tried to ignore it. Tried to tell myself I was just overthinking things. But then, one night, it happened. I leaned in to kiss her goodnight, like I always did. And that's when I smelled it. Men's cologne. Not mine. Something expensive. Something strong. Something that didn't belong in a hospital room. I pulled back slightly, my stomach twisting. For a split second, I almost asked. Almost confronted her right then and there. But I didn't. Because I was a coward. Because I wanted to believe my wife would never do that to me. So I swallowed my suspicion, forced a smile, and walked out the door. A week later, I got the phone call that shattered my world. A woman's voice. Soft. Hesitant. "Mr. Carter?" "Yes?" I don't know how to say this, but I think you need to know. I work at the hospital where your wife was staying. I sat up straighter. "Okay." She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "I've seen your wife with one of the doctors here. More than once. They are close." Silence. I gripped the phone so tight my fingers ached. "What do you mean, close?" "I mean, I don't think she was at the hospital just for medical reasons." A cold wave crashed over me. I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Who is this?" I demanded. "Just someone who thinks you deserve the truth." Click. The line went dead. And just like that, everything I thought I knew about my wife, about my marriage, my life, collapsed in an instant. I must have listened to that voicemail 100 times. Each time, I hoped I'd hear something different. Some hidden clue, some misunderstanding. But the words never changed. I don't think she was at the hospital just for medical reasons. I barely slept that night. My mind kept racing, replaying every moment, every little sign I'd ignored. The distance. The locked phone. The cologne. The fucking cologne. Morning came, but I felt like I hadn't moved from my chair. My coffee sat untouched on the table, long since gone cold. I had work to do, but there was no way in hell I could focus. I needed answers. But first, I needed to know if this was even real. Sharon was still asleep when I walked into our bedroom. I stood there, watching her. The woman I had spent my entire adult life with. The woman who, just a day ago, I would have trusted with my life. I felt sick. She stirred, blinking up at me. "You're up early," she murmured. I forced a smile. "Couldn't sleep." She stretched, yawning. "You should have stayed in bed." Bed. The same bed she had probably been lying in, thinking about another man. Something inside me cracked. "I got a weird call last night," I said casually, watching her reaction. Her face didn't change. "Oh?" "Someone from the hospital. Said you were close with a doctor there." That got her attention. Her body tensed, just slightly, but enough for me to notice. "What?" "That's ridiculous." I shrugged, still keeping my voice light. "Yeah, that's what I figured. I mean, that'd be crazy, right?" She let out a small laugh, but it sounded forced. "People love to gossip. Don't pay attention to it." I nodded. But something felt off. Something was off. I let it go, for now. But I wasn't done. That afternoon, while Sharon was in the shower, I did something I had never done in my entire marriage. I went through her phone. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. She had a passcode, of course. A year ago, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. Now, it felt like a locked door hiding something I wasn't supposed to see. I tried the obvious, our anniversary, our kids' birthdays. Nothing. Then, on a whim, I tried the one thing I didn't want to believe she would use. The year we got married. The screen unlocked. My stomach dropped. I don't know what I expected to find. A message, a photo, some undeniable proof. But there was nothing. Or rather, there was too much nothing. Her texts were too clean. No messages older than a few weeks. No emails. No call history beyond a month. She had deleted everything. I put the phone back, my heart pounding. My hands were sweaty. I had no proof. But I had confirmation. Something was wrong. That night, I barely spoke to Sharon. She didn't seem to notice. She was glued to her phone again, fingers tapping away. Texting someone. Not me. I needed real proof. And I knew exactly how to get it. I wasn't going to be played for a fool. Not after 40 years of loyalty. Not after everything I had given this woman. I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. The phone had given me nothing except the knowledge that she was hiding something. But if she was hiding something, that meant there was something to find. So I started watching her. Not in an obvious way. I wasn't stupid. I didn't confront her. I didn't let on that I was suspicious. Instead, I did what any smart man would do, I waited. And it didn't take long. Sharon had never been the kind of woman to go out much. She had her book club, the occasional lunch with friends, but she wasn't a social butterfly. That's why, when she suddenly started leaving the house more often, I noticed. At first, it was harmless. "I'm going to the store," she'd say. Or, "I'm meeting Lisa for lunch." But then the excuses started getting thinner. "I just need to get some fresh air. I'll be back soon." And she'd be gone for hours. One evening, I decided to follow her. I felt ridiculous at first. Like some jealous teenager checking up on his high school girlfriend. But this wasn't high school. This was my marriage. My life. She left the house around 6 p.m. Said she was going to the store. I waited a few minutes, then grabbed my keys and followed. She didn't go to the store. I watched as she drove across town and pulled into the parking lot of a small cafe. I parked far enough away that she wouldn't see me and waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. And then I saw him. A tall man, well-dressed, confident. He walked straight to her car, leaned in through the driver's side window, and kissed her. Kissed my wife. My hands clenched into fists on the steering wheel. My vision blurred with rage. I wanted to get out of the car. To rip that bastard apart. But I didn't. Because I wasn't done collecting proof. I took out my phone and snapped a picture. Then another. And another. The bastard got into the passenger seat. They drove off together. I followed. They went to a hotel. A fucking hotel. I watched as they parked, got out, and walked inside, her arm wrapped around his. That was it. That was all I needed. The woman I had loved for 40 years had been lying to me. Sneaking around behind my back like a filthy whore. But she had no idea. No idea what was coming for her. I drove home in silence. Not because I was calm, far from it. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. My jaw was clenched so hard my teeth ached. But I needed to think. I needed to be smart. Storming into that hotel, dragging Sharon out by her hair, beating that bastard into the pavement, sure, that would have felt good. But it wouldn't have been enough. I didn't want revenge in the heat of the moment. I wanted to ruin her. She had spent months, maybe even years, lying to my face, humiliating me. She thought I was just some old fool who wouldn't notice. Well, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. I spent the next few days watching, waiting, planning. I pretended everything was normal. I kissed her goodbye in the morning. I asked about her day. I even smiled at her over dinner, knowing damn well she had spent the afternoon with him. And she had no clue. That was the worst part. Every time she looked at me, there wasn't even a flicker of guilt. She wasn't ashamed. She wasn't nervous. She truly believed I was too stupid to figure it out. But she had made a mistake. A big one. One evening, she was getting ready to meet Lisa for coffee. Same lie, different day. As she stood in front of the mirror, putting on perfume, I walked up behind her. "That smells nice," I said. She smiled. "You like it?" I leaned in, inhaling deeply. "Yeah, but I like the one you wore last night better." She froze. For just a second. Then she forced a laugh, shaking her head. "I didn't wear perfume last night." Liar. I kissed her cheek, hiding my smirk. Must have been my imagination. I watched her in the mirror. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't scared. She really thought I was that stupid. That's when I knew I wasn't just going to leave her. I was going to make her suffer. But the real kicker? The next day, I met her lover. And he had no idea who I was. Fate has a twisted sense of humor. If someone had told me a week ago that I'd be shaking hands with the man who was screwing my wife, I would have laughed in their face. But there I was. It happened by accident. Or maybe it was fate throwing me a bone. Either way, I wasn't going to waste the opportunity. I was at a coffee shop, just grabbing a quick cup before heading home, when I saw him. At first, I wasn't sure. He looked different in the daylight, less impressive, less confident than he had at the hotel. But when he smiled at the barista, I recognized that smug, self-satisfied expression immediately. This was him. The bastard. I took a deep breath, forced my hands to unclench, and walked straight up to him. "You mind if I sit here?" I asked, nodding toward the empty seat at his table. He looked up, surprised, but then shrugged. Sure, man. Go ahead. I sat down, studying him. He was younger than me, probably in his late 40s. Well-dressed, but not flashy. He had the kind of face that made women trust him. The kind of face that made my wife forget 40 years of marriage. What's your name? I asked, keeping my voice casual. He grinned. Chris. Chris. I let the name settle in my mind. The man my wife whispered to at night. The man who made her laugh while I sat alone in our living room. I smiled. Nice to meet you, Chris. I'm Robert. We shook hands. And I swore to myself, this hand you shaking? It's the same hand that's going to ruin your life. I leaned back in my chair, pretending to be relaxed. So, Chris, what do you do? He sipped his coffee. Finance. You? Retired. Used to run my own business. Nice, man. You married? I almost laughed. Yeah. You? Nah, not anymore, he said, smirking. Single life suits me better. I wanted to shove that smirk down his throat. Instead, I took a sip of my coffee. That's so? Yeah. I mean, I've got someone I'm seeing, but it's nothing serious. My fingers twitched. I kept my face neutral. Oh yeah? What's she like? He grinned. She's amazing, man. Beautiful. Classy. Married, but, not happily. My stomach twisted. I nodded, pretending to be interested. Really? That's gotta be complicated. Chris shrugged. Not really. Her husband's some old guy. She's just waiting for the right time to leave him. I clenched my fists under the table. Sounds like a good deal for you, I said through gritted teeth. Chris chuckled. Yeah, man. And the best part? He has no idea. I smiled. Yeah. No idea at all. Chris had no idea who I was. And that made this even better. I took a slow sip of my coffee, keeping my hands steady, my expression casual. Meanwhile, every muscle in my body was screaming at me to rip this bastard apart. Instead, I smiled. So, I said, leaning back in my chair, how long have you been seeing this woman? Chris smirked, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. A little over a year. A year. For over 12 months, my wife had been sneaking around with this guy. Lying to my face. Sleeping in my bed at night, while whispering his name during the day. I nodded, forcing myself to stay calm. That's a long time. Must be serious. Chris shrugged. I mean, I like her, but it's not like I'm in love or anything. It's just fun, you know? Just fun. My jaw clenched. Right. And she's still married? Chris chuckled. Yeah, but not for long. She's just waiting for the right time to leave him. I tilted my head. What's she waiting for? Chris leaned in slightly, as if sharing a secret. Honestly? She's milking it. Her husband's a good provider, takes care of everything. She's waiting until she can get the most out of the divorce before she pulls the trigger. I felt my vision blur with rage. She was using me. For 40 years, I loved this woman. I worked my ass off to give her a good life. And she was waiting until she could bleed me dry. I forced a chuckle. Smart woman. Chris grinned. Yeah, she knows what she's doing. I took a deep breath, steadied myself. I couldn't blow it now. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and held it up. "Mind if I take a picture, man?" Chris frowned. "A picture?" "Yeah, you seem like a cool guy. Just wanna remember this moment." He hesitated, then shrugged. "Sure." I snapped the photo. And just like that, I had exactly what I needed. Chris had no idea his life was about to fall apart. Chris had no idea his life was hanging by a thread. I sat across from him, sipping my coffee, pretending to be just another guy making conversation. But in my mind, I was already planning his destruction. "Finance, huh?" I said casually. "That's gotta be stressful." Chris smirked. "Not really. I've got good clients. They trust me." Trust. That word lingered in my mind. People trusted Chris with their money, their investments, their futures. And he was using that money to buy fancy dinners and hotel rooms for my wife. I leaned back, pretending to be impressed. "That's great, man. Reputation is everything in your business, huh?" Chris nodded, clearly enjoying the attention. "Yeah, one bad move and you're done." I smiled. "Makes sense. So, who are your clients? The usual rich guys?" Chris hesitated, then shrugged. "Yeah. Some CEOs, a couple of small business owners. People with money." Perfect. I finished my coffee, already knowing my next move. Chris had just handed me everything I needed to destroy him. That night, I did my research. Chris wasn't hard to find. His company website had his full name, credentials, and, most importantly, a list of some of his biggest clients. I spent the next few hours compiling everything. Screenshots of his texts with my wife. Pictures from the hotel. The smug look on his face when he told me he was sleeping with a married woman. Then, I crafted the perfect email. Subject: important information about your financial advisor. I attached the photos and texts, then sent them to every client I could find. By morning, Chris's career was over. And he had no idea. Chris's downfall started at 9 a.m. I knew because I was watching. Sitting in my car across the street from his office, I saw the moment it began. First, his secretary rushed into his office, looking panicked. Then, his phone started ringing non-stop. I imagined the conversations. "Chris, what the hell is this? Why am I getting emails with pictures of you screwing a married woman? You're supposed to be managing my money, not destroying your own reputation." Chris came outside 30 minutes later, phone pressed to his ear, pacing back and forth, his face red with frustration. I smiled. He had no idea who did this. Not yet. But the best part? This was just the beginning. That afternoon, I got another idea. Chris had humiliated me. Now, I was going to humiliate him. I created a fake email account, attached the same photos and texts, and sent them somewhere special. To his mother. To his sister. To his ex-wife. By the evening, Chris's world was collapsing from every direction. And I wasn't done. Because now, it was time for my wife to pay. By the time I got home, I was calm. Too calm. I walked through the front door, smelling the familiar scent of our house. A home I had built. A home I had paid for. A home where my wife had betrayed me. Sharon was in the kitchen, humming to herself. She didn't look like a woman who had been sneaking around behind her husband's back. She looked comfortable. Safe. That was about to change. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, turning to smile at me. "How was your day?" I smiled back. "Great. Really productive." She had no idea. I walked up to her, wrapped my arms around her waist, and kissed her cheek. She melted into my touch, just like she always did. Liar. How about we go out for dinner tonight? I suggested. Sharon's eyes lit up. Oh? What's the occasion? I shrugged. Just felt like treating my beautiful wife. She giggled, playfully nudging me. You sweet. I grinned. I know. She had no clue. This wasn't just a dinner. This was her last meal before the execution. The restaurant was perfect. It was elegant, classy, packed with people enjoying their evening. The kind of place where reputations mattered. Sharon was glowing. She had dressed up for the occasion, wearing a dress I had bought for her years ago. She had no idea this was her funeral. We ordered wine. Talked. She laughed. She had no idea I was savoring every moment. Then, as the waiter poured our drinks, I pulled out my phone. I have a surprise for you, I said. Sharon smiled. Oh? What is it? I clicked the button. The projector behind me lit up. And suddenly, every screen in the restaurant was filled with images. Pictures of her and Chris. Texts between them. Screenshots of their secret meetings. The entire restaurant fell silent. Sharon gasped, her face draining of color. I leaned in, my voice calm, deadly. Here's to 40 years of marriage, I said, raising my glass. Sharon trembled. Robert. I can explain? I stood up. No need. I already did. I turned to the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, my wife has been sleeping with another man for over a year. She thought I wouldn't find out. She was wrong. Sharon looked around in horror. People were whispering, staring, some even pulling out their phones. She reached for me, but I stepped back. This dinner was my gift to you, Sharon, I said coldly. The last thing I'll ever give you. Then I dropped my wedding ring into my wine glass. And walked away. Leaving her to drown in the ruins of her perfect little lie.